Senator, what do you make of the president's conclusion here today that he accepts the intelligence community's conclusion that Russia meddled in 2016, but for whatever reason was not able to express that, to articulate that yesterday when he was at the news conference with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think, first of all, it should be noted that I think on 4 different occasions prior to the news conference, he has said that he believes that Russia did meddle. He says he believes they were responsible for it and so forth. And so most of us have assumed that the president's known all along that Russia was clearly meddling in our U.S. election, that they are actively involved in cyber espionage. And so yesterday, when he came out and he decided that he would be very low-key with Mr. Putin and that he would not challenge him in front of the world, you get to wonder what his tactic was. And I guess a number of us had thought that perhaps his tactic was, look, we want to move on from this and we're just not going to make that a big issue. But at the same time, Mr. Putin had no problem in denying that they were involved in this, and yet the entire world knows that they were.
Senator Rounds, I'm sorry to break in, but is this damage control? And if it is it enough for you?
Well, first of all, as I said earlier, the president knew that Russia was meddling in the election. He said it 4 different occasions before this time. And so yesterday, it was almost as if, for some reason, he didn't want to have that discussion with Mr. Putin in the room. And so,
but does that bother you, Senator? Does that bother you? I mean, does that make you feel concerned, or is it just sort of an oversight that we can move on from?
No, I think it bothered a lot of us, and we were trying to figure out what the president had in mind. What was this tactic that he was trying to employ? Why was he allowing this to occur? And the only thing we can think of is basically his thought process was, Mr. Putin, you were meddling, you know it, and you know that I know it, and so you want to move on from this thing here. But let's be aware of the fact that we're all aware that Russia was meddling in this election. And if you don't want to get into it here, fine, we're going to have to move on. But remember, we know exactly what you folks did. And we do. And we know that this isn't the first time. And right now they're still doing it in Europe as well.
Senator, you call this perhaps a tactic. Are you in support of this tactic? Do you think that this is a good way to approach things?
I do not agree with this tactic. I think his overall goal of trying to find a way to work with Russia is appropriate, but this particular tactic I don't think works. And I think the fact is, I think Mr. Reagan had the right idea, President Reagan had the right idea. When you're dealing with Russia, you can trust, but you verify. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Putin was not telling the truth when he said that the state did not have anything to do with it. And I think you have to call him on it. And how the president handled it yesterday, I don't think that was the right tactic to use.
Right.
Because clearly the president knew that Mr. Putin was not being straightforward. He was telling a whopper. And we all knew it. And yet,
Senator,
here was an opportunity on the world stage to correct it.
Senator, I want to bring you what Senator Schumer actually just said. He was saying that the GOP needs to demand that Trump release his tax returns in light of what happened at the summit, given the fact that we don't have full transparency on some of his financial interactions. Are you prepared to request that President Trump reveal his tax returns, as he has not done yet?
Look, at least they're consistent. They're still trying to rerun the 2016 election. I think that's one of the challenges that this president has is Democrats continue to try to suggest that it's an illegitimate presidency, and it's not. President Trump won the electoral votes. He is the president of the United States. This is not going to change, and so we need to move forward. But we need to address the issue of Russia and what they're doing in cyberspace. They are a threat, and they continue to threaten not only our country, but our allies as well. And so we have to face the fact that Russia is not going to go away, and until such time as we make it clear that there is a cost to doing these type of cyber incursions, they're going to continue to do it.
Senator, we've been speaking to President Trump's 2020 campaign manager. We asked him to respond to some Republican criticism that the president was treasonous in his news conference with Putin in Helsinki. Take a listen.
We have rhinos within the party who say that. I believe that you'll see, and you'll long-term see, just like the president has done time after time after time, showing that he's right and he's making the world safer and making this economy better. And I believe in him.
Again, that was Brad Parscale, who is a campaign manager for the Trump 2020 campaign. What do you make of this? How should Republicans proceed in the in the midterm elections and then the 2020 election as well? How big of a deal should this be?
First of all, with regard to any suggestions of treason, that's not called for. That's inappropriate. It's not the right direction. If you disagree with the tactic which is being employed, then disagree with the tactic. If you think there's a better way to approach it, then approach it differently. Suggest alternatives. Give us a better way. Such as today we're talking about this, and I say, I disagree with the president's tactic, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that he truly believes that he's doing what's right for America. His goal is to find a way to get around an issue between two nuclear powerhouses in the world. And he believes that nuclear weapons are a threat to humanity.
Yeah.
And he wants to find a way through it. There's nothing treasonous about that. You may disagree with a tactic, but don't accuse someone of treason because of that.
Senator, I'm wondering, just moving away from tactics and heading toward policies, you are representing South Dakota, a state that does depend on agriculture. I'm just wondering, do you support the policies that President Trump has basically enacted with some of the tariffs and the tariff threats, and how that will affect the economy of your state?
We support the goal of better trade policies, but we disagree with the tactics that are being employed. And just as an example, the strategic thought that, number one, you're going to fight with Canada, you're going to fight with Mexico, you have instability within the trade between two of our closest allies, and then you turn around and you do not do the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, with 500 million people who wanted to trade with us.
Right.
And in the first month of the presidency, he says, no, I don't want to do that. But he hasn't set up a single individual trade agreement with any one of those other 11 countries. And then finally, you take on the big dog, China, while you do not have stability with the rest of your trading partners. We disagree with that. In South Dakota, it's a big deal because we're running out of time before our commodities start to come to harvest. Soybean, corn, and wheat. And right now, from March 1st until today, we're down over $800 million in value in the commodities that our producers are going to have to bring to market. So
right.
We want better trade policies, but we disagree with the tactics that are being made right now.
So I hear a common theme here. We disagree with the tactics. We agree with the president on the overall approach. Let's go back to where we started, which is the president saying he accepts the U.S. intelligence conclusion that Russia meddled in the 2016 elections. That being the case, the president now clarifying that once and for all. What is the GOP doing to ensure that our next election is safe?
To begin with, you have to go back to what the Science Advisory Board for the Department of Defense put out in February of 2017. And what they said was, number one, we have to make our defenses stronger across the entire country, not just in the Department of Defense, but countrywide. So we have to make it more expensive for the bad guys to get into our cyber domains. But second of all, and just as importantly, for the next 10 years, they will still be able to break into our defenses eventually. It will cost them more, but they can still break in. In order to deter that, we have to have an offensive capability and be prepared to deploy that offensive capability when we have a threat. And that's part of our public policy discussion today. Our public policy today is so tough to get through in terms of having consent from a number of different levels of government in order to offensively go in and take out a site before they launch one of these cyber missiles at us, that we have to fix that today. We all agree it's got to be fixed, but you have a concern that at what level do you approve those particular attacks outside of our country going into a third party and taking out a server that might very well be the launching base for some of the attacks into our country. Yeah. That's the part that we've got to get right, and that today we do not have a good plan in place.